My name is Steve Gottlieb. For over 40 years, I've run the Boundless School, a clunky, messy, yet glorious charity for teens. Join us for Figuring It Out, where we meet others building their own clumsy utopias. Their stories are compelling because life refuses to be tidy. That's where it gets interesting.
You're listening to CHHA 1610 AM Toronto, the voice of the community. I'm your host, Steve Gottlieb, for the show Figuring It Out, Tales of Clumsy Utopias. Today I want to introduce who I regard as two Indigenous superheroes who are battling with the question, has life actually improved for Indigenous people since I first met them in the late 90s? So we're going to unpack that. But first, with introductions, I'd like to introduce Julie. Help me, Julie.
Mawasagi.
Julie Mawasagi, who is the supervisor of the Aboriginal Child and Family Centre, Mount Dennis Hub with the Native Child and Family Services of Toronto. And of course, my old friend and paddle partner, Ken Richard, the former executive director of the Native Child and Family Services of Toronto, and currently engaged in all kinds of projects supporting the Indigenous community. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I want to begin with a story of how I first met Ken way back in 1997, 29 years ago. And I had thought, why not explore the notion of working with, at the time we used to call it Native kids. And I remember meeting with the director of the youth program, Jamie, in this dank basement on Yonge Street beside the massage parlors. And that meeting was going well. And then you popped in, Ken. And Ken showed up with this shirt buttoned down, optimistically revealing perhaps 5 chest hairs. He spread onto the chair, and he handed me a card. And it said Ken Richard, and it had 2 N's. And I said, Ken, why do you have 2 N's? And he goes, well, it's just short for Kenneth. And I go, imagine all the million typing strokes that are wasted with that extra N. And of course, I got that cackle that the listeners just heard, sort of like a hyena in adolescence. And for me, Ken, it was love at first sight. And you and I embarked on beautiful projects together for many decades. So I want to begin with asking you, Ken, how did your journey lead you to founding the Native Family and Child Services? And what was it? And how did you get there?
So I'm from Winnipeg. I stumbled into this whole social work business by doing what I often did, following a woman into something. I had a girlfriend. I was lost at sea. I was a musician, aspiring musician, and failing miserably. I ended up selling guitar strings on Portage Avenue in Winnipeg. And my girlfriend goes to a social work orientation session. I go with her. I find some, there's an ex Londoner there, activist, social worker from the radical school, it's called. And he just inflamed me, and I became a friend for life. And I just moved into social work to work with the poor. And I'm so old that I was actually working with what they call draft dodgers. We call war resistors. Never mind these lost at sea kids in Winnipeg. Anyway, so I eventually graduated. And then I graduated as an activist, a poverty activist, and looked for poverty activist jobs. Imagine how many or how few poverty activist jobs there exist out there. So nothing. Children's Aid of Winnipeg, yes. Hiring everybody. I find myself carrying a caseload of traumatized, addicted, in absolute distress, in heartbreaking poverties, Indigenous people from mostly the far north of Manitoba. There was no services, there was no reconciliation. It was just a mess. These folks were, the primary services for those kids was child removal. You know, imagine that. You phone up for help and somebody comes along and takes your kid. And that was a machine. And I worked there for a year, but it activated me. So it's really, everywhere I looked subsequent to that, I looked for opportunities to raise trouble, because that was, it was indecent that a system.
NFNCS was the first child welfare program for Indigenous kids.
In the country, the first Indigenous authority.
So what made the leap? How did you make the leap to doing that?
I was very aggressive. I also had a lot of folks that were also, simpatico. So it wasn't a completely solo adventure. So it was a classic community development, actually the work that I'd been trained to do in the first place. So putting together systems, advocating, creating, arguments, and they were easy to make, and having a kind of an open door, which we had at that time because it was the beginning of a consciousness. This is the 80s. There was legislation changing. There was Indigenous activism. There was a national story about a child who killed himself in care, named Richard Cardinal, that we rode on that energy. And I was delighted to volunteer, actually.
You were a bit of a legend back then. I would hear stories of you.
I was kicking ass.
I would hear stories of you riding around in your motorcycle, browbeating bureaucrats.
Well, yes, but I was trying to be kind too. I didn't do personal assaults. It was entirely systemic. It was fueled by sort of ideology and a lot of empathy for these kids. I have my own relatives actually that ended up in care and one committing suicide. So it was a just fight for me. It was clear, and I was clear with those who I came into contact with, and that clarity sometimes is a little off-putting because Toronto was so polite and all that. But so we intimidated, cajoled, persuaded, and otherwise got people on board. And over time, we built the agency literally brick by brick. It started off with an empty room. I walked into an empty room. There's nothing there. There's a phone on the floor.
Do you remember the moment when you got a government official to actually hear you and loosen the purse strings?
We had to rely on, a number. There wasn't a magic moment. No. It was just a steady assault. It's like the Russians with the Ukrainians, just throw as much artillery as you can at the issue. Because as people began to realize what we were about, they started getting nervous. And I'm talking about the children's aid societies and the government and such, because, we were moving very quickly and they weren't keeping up. They have kept up now to some extent. Native Child is what it is today. But at that time, I was actually getting lines like, well, if we give you authority to do child welfare, the Chinese will, so they we were in this multicultural stew pot. And I had to get us out of there, which we did. In recognition of our.
Why separate?
Why?
Yeah.
We have an entirely different history. All the nations and the Métis communities have an entirely different history from immigrants. It denigrates the cause of immigrants and refugees to roll it into our issue, and it does the same with us. That we are constitutionally based. We are actually the third founding nation of the country. We didn't come here from afar. We were here.
Excuse the pun, but you were whitewashed. The kids were whitewashed.
They were there was always been a policy of getting rid of Indian kids, and I mean the Indian culture that they carry. So that's still the case. Actually, it's dressed up differently now, but Yeah, so we've been fighting those forces. And child welfare was a particularly heinous kind of assimilative process where you literally make kids disappear. Most of the kids that were in Winnipeg that I came on my caseload when I started there were bound for Massachusetts. And I have horror stories galore about their experiences. So it was an easy fight to fight. The right and the wrong was clear. I was vested.
I'm going to read this here. You were the recipient of the Meritorious Service Award of Ontario, and there's this long list.
No, of Canada, my friend.
Of Canada, from the Governor General.
Highest civilian medal pinned on my chest.
So I want to ask you, again, back to those early days, if you can think of a moment where you first learned how much Native Family Child really mattered.
God, I wish I could give you something good, Steve. I think, I don't know why I did this. This is like a weakness on my part. I just flashed to Prince Charles visiting us. And that was a tremendous affirmation of our existence to have the future king. So that sounds so damn colonial. I just want to go shoot myself. But that's, that's really what those sorts of things to get that kind of recognition. But we were, I guess, most of all, we were leading others, including First Nation agencies.
Ken, it's ironic, man. It's ironic because
it is ironic. It is
ironic that there are thousands of stories of ways you've helped people, but you, being the executive director, had a macro approach. But I think that one of the many poignant examples is sitting on this screen, Julie, who grew up there.
Yeah,
we will be exploring that after the break.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to tell some stories about how Ken claims to have saved my life. We'll be back in a moment. Thank you. Welcome back to CHHA Toronto, 1610 AM. I'm here with Julie and Ken. We're talking about Indigenous culture and whether life has actually improved. Ken and Julie, I want to tell a story of way back when. On our very first trip, Ken, I wasn't very happy that you inserted yourself on that very first trip. I think you did it to audit us. It took years, really, for Native Family Child to trust Boundless. And on that first trip, we had this client named Bruce, who was 18, without the use of his hand. It was permanently locked in this position, which made him not able to hold a paddle. He was the most gregarious, lovely guy who managed to hold down a roofing job, but no one could paddle with him. And so I chose to take him in my boat. And I realized the folly of that decision early on because my job was to be a rescue canoe for the group and to be the river guide. And somehow he and I figured it out. And in doing so, we became really bonded. And on the last night of the trip, we were having a celebration when everyone was talking about their accomplishments. And all of a sudden, we heard this blood-curdling scream coming from Bruce. And all of us were struck silent, like a lightning bolt of silence. And then he speaks as if he's a Zen master. And he goes, "My teacher tells me that I have to let go of my attachments." And he pulls out this eagle feather and he presents it to me. And I was dumbfounded. And you and the other elders of the trip were beside yourselves You couldn't believe this just happened. There was frustration. There was this sense that Bruce gave away something with so frivolously. And I remember meeting you the next morning on the beach in this gentle rain. And you explained to me that the significance of that gift, of which I was painfully ignorant about, was something akin to like a bar mitzvah. It had that much cultural power and meaning. And it was my first introduction to the ambivalence that the Indigenous community is treated boundless. When you know us and you trust us, you fall in love with us, but it takes time. And I think it took us like 5 years to finally earn your trust. Let's meet Julie now and hear about her incredible work at the Native Family Child. Would you please, let's begin, Julie. I'd like you to tell the story. I know how much you grew up connected to Native Family Child. What did that support mean to you in your life?
Well, you know, as Ken's sharing all these stories, like, I'm a witness. I've been around Native Child for, could be 26 years. And it began with my older sister started her student placement when she was in college with Jamie Taguri, who you mentioned earlier. And I started to learn about the services in the youth department and have an opportunity to attend a Boundless trip as well, a couple of them. And I think connecting with the youth department, the youth workers, they were so amazing. I felt like they were, like I had the community at my back, like they were surrounding me and encouraging me, you know, to go to post-secondary. You know, they helped write my reference letters to go to the transitional year program at U of T. I remember them helping me study. And their support meant so much because I don't think that my family, they were in a position, you know, to really support me in my growth, because I think they were just so focused on their own healing from their trauma. And so at times I kind of feel like as a young person, I had to figure things out on my own. So the youth department, they were there for me in that way. And
now it's gone all full circle. Tell us what you do now. Tell us what you do now.
So right now I'm supervising one of our community hubs, and our community hub, we provide, you know, lots of services of early on programming for 0 to 6. We have an Aboriginal Head Start program that operates out of our center. And we do children and youth after school programming, cultural, ceremonial events, seniors programming, and, you know, lots of family days. And I'm just loving this work. It's just, you know, spending time with community. That's what the work is for me right now. I get to be with my community and see them every day. And we laugh, we share, we support each other, we collaborate. And really, we're just, you know, working together to, you know, meet the needs of Indigenous community, because, you know, the services, right?
What are those needs, Julie?
Well, the needs are, I could see that, you know, we have some, you know, parents, some adults still working through their trauma. I could see it impacting our kids and the access to resources that they really need. I work with, for example, some school board clinicians, and they're in the schools advocating for our children to get the right supports. I think our kids are still struggling in school. Our families, they're struggling with food security. So, you know, luckily our hub, we can provide that support.
I've seen you guys in action. You all came up to Boundless last summer, and you're coming again this summer. It was remarkable how the community encircled itself with care. It was gentle and powerful at the same time. It leads me to an overarching question, and I'd like to ask you both this. Maybe we can just have a discussion, but we have the benefit of a 30-year window to make a comparison for when we all first met. Have things actually improved for the Indigenous community in the last 30 years? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Mine or Ken? Me or Ken?
Start with you, Julie.
So I have worked in the youth department as well. I ended up being the supervisor of the youth department a couple of years ago. And I feel that things are the same from when I was a youth going into the center. I think our families are still struggling. But, you know, there are, I think our community is stronger at the same time, and we're resilient. And, you know, because of agencies like Native Child and Family Services, you know, there's lots of urban Indigenous organizations. We come together and we bring community together. And that's what I love, that there's more community events we can go to. I remember as a youth, I don't remember going around dances. Now there's, you know, every organization is hosting a round dance. So I see the strength in our culture and our ceremony.
Ken, same question.
Well, statistically, there's been a lot of improvement. So let me go there for just a second. You know, there's more kids graduating from high school, for example, than ever before. And, you know, graduation from high school is probably the most significant thing you can do in terms of life chances. You know, everybody talks about post-secondary. No, it's great. You get your grade 12 and you're likely to have employment. You don't, you're likely to not. In terms of Indigenous girls, women and girls, I think they are especially vulnerable. They're still having, well, they're vulnerable on so many levels, and missing murders, Indigenous women and girls is just sort of the most dark side of it all. But early pregnancy, that life chances on that are compromised. So there's lots of things that, you know, that are kind of getting in the way, but also you got to see the light side of it, because folks having children mean there's going to be something, because Canadians have stopped doing that. So, you know, I'm torn. Things are better than they were. Yes, no kids are disappearing anymore in the child welfare system. You know, there's a hell of a lot more accountability than there ever was. And there are a lot of Indigenous, not enough, but a lot of Indigenous folks who have taken control personally and organizationally and politically of the master's house. So, you know, I'm very hopeful, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle to establish any kind of sovereignty, even when you're a First Nation. Imagine trying to do that in the city. There's no sovereignty in the city. It's a question
Ken,
of compromises.
you once said to me, it was a powerful statement.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sorry.
When are we going to laugh? You promised to be more fun than this. This is dead serious.
I know. I'm working on it. I'm figuring it out, like the title of the show. You once told me, you know, when woke and social justice movements started becoming very powerful, you once said to me over a lunch, you said, you know, Indigenous people don't care about equity. They want autonomy. What did you mean by that?
The capacity to run your own shop as a third nation. Just what I mean by that, third founding nation, the capacity to have decision-making at the governance level, right down to the services provided, legislation backing it up, and funding agreements that go forever. But they're, what I mean is built into some kind of legislative framework. We don't want to crowd the room, because it's pretty crowded on folks seeking equity-seeking groups. We don't want that. We want equity of outcome, absolutely, but that's done through sovereignty, if you can kind of wrap your head around that. And that's the only hope we have for survival. And what I mean by survival is urbanization of Indigenous Canada is profound. Every census, it's 20% more people.
Every election, it's at the top of the agenda, the federal agenda. And then what
Well,
happens?
not anymore.
Yeah. What's happening?
It's all about Trump and economy and such, and Indigenous Services Canada is pulling back on many commitments. There is a withdrawal of support that's currently not being fought very well by Assembly of First Nations, by the Indigenous service sector. Toronto has experienced dramatic cuts right across the board, including Native Child, from what I understand.
My daughter said to me before this episode, Dad, you better not get canceled. Ken, did you just get canceled? Did you just criticize your peers?
No. Well, yes. There's not enough activism, certainly at the local level, to form alliances, for example, with First Nations that are unified and that recognizes that your rights don't end when you leave the reserve. That work is not done. That no agency in Toronto is doing that, including Native Child. They mostly don't know what to do, so they meet with each other. I'm very critical of the current service system in terms of its lack of political acumen and connections. They need better relations with their First Nations. The only one that really has it is Council Fire.
Is there anything you're doing now to move it along, move this process along?
Yeah,
in a direction?
You got me going on something that bugs me.
Yeah. Well, let's end with this. Boundless's relationship has been nothing short of magical with the Native Family and Child Services. I would think on the sixth or seventh trip, we would kept going to the Des Moines River in Quebec. And remember, we would camp over that waterfall, and that same blue heron would visit every time we came for 5 or 6 years.
The old man. Did we call him the old man? Because he looked old.
And you would come on these trips. The big shot Ken would come with the little kids. And I remember we were camping at this place, and I would camp 50 meters away from the kids because otherwise I would wake up completely catatonic being surrounded by teenagers. And I was having a little pre-dinner nap. And you must have gotten restless, and you came and you walked over and visited me. And then you started talking to me through my tent, and you were boring me to death. And I got out of that tent, and 30 seconds later, a poplar tree crashed that tent and would have scattered my brains all over the campfire. You bored me to death. Instead, you bored me to life, Ken, and I thank you.
Well, let me tell you, I was in the midst of something altogether different at that campfire, and I wasn't bored, but I had a notion, a tickle, a brush that said, go and get Steve. And it wasn't articulated quite like that, but I wanted to go and bring you out of your tent, not just to talk to you. But you were at that point sort of, well, I think you wanted peace and quiet. So you weren't all that welcoming. But because of my personal charm, I charmed you out of that tent and saved your life. That's how I see it.
We've had elders on these trips who summoned eagles for the benefit of the kids to see. We had one elder attempt to control the weather and succeed. So it wouldn't rain when we were pitching tent. It's been a most magical partnership. I am so grateful to you both for joining me today. We have barely scraped the surface of what's going on in the Indigenous community. It sounds like there's some gains, but perhaps not quickly enough. Coming up next, we'll be meeting with Stephanie Mickey Adams, the executive director of Inukarigit, who supports Inuit people when they move south in Ottawa. We'll see you after the break. You're listening to CHHA 1610 AM Toronto. I'm your host, Stephen Gottlieb, and I am so thrilled to welcome Stephanie Adams, but folks call her Mickey, and I'm going to call her Mickey. Mickey, in the last 10 years, when I've approached Indigenous groups to come to Boundless, I'm met with intrigue, but I'm often met with distrust. And when I came to you 5 or 6 years ago, your heart was so open. And since then, Boundless and Inukadigi have done, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 major adventures together. And it's been one of the greatest joys of my professional career to work with your people. And I know your story itself is compelling, so let's begin there. Mickey, where does it begin, your story, and how did it lead you to Inukadigi?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Stephen. Those are very good questions. And I would have to say that, and I always start with my family. My story begins with my family. It begins with the strength of the Inuit women in my family, in kitchens filled with stories, in laughter that has carried even when things were hard. I would say it began in a culture that has taught me that we survive together or not at all, especially in the harsh Arctic winters. It's really important that we trust our family and we build our family, and also in laughter that carried even when things were hard as well. But my story was also shaped by systems too that were not built for Inuit.
What do you
I
mean?
grew up I grew up seeing, for instance, the beauty and barriers. I saw the power of our Inuit culture, our humor, our sharing, our deep sense of responsibility to another. And then I also saw what happens when Inuit families live in places where services don't understand us. For instance, where policies are written without us in mind, or where you walk into an office and we feel like we have to explain our existence before we can ask for help. Because far too often, my Inuit culture is thought to be the same as First Nations and Métis, whereas we are very distinctive culture, very different. We might have the same almost holistic worldview, but their values and ethics are quite different. And I see what happens when Inuit families live in places where services don't understand us,
Was
where
that you?
policies are, yes,
Did you
yeah.
grow up in a place? So, what was the name of the place you grew up in? And tell us about what that was like, how the systems that you're describing translated into your childhood.
Yes, definitely. So, my parents separated when I was young. So I was raised in Churchill, Manitoba until I was about 11 years old. And then my parents separated. My mom moved up to Rankin Inlet, and my father moved out to Winnipeg. And the very first thing that I had to deal with was back in 1990, I want to say 91. The court system then for a child, I had to sit on a I had to sit in court up on the seat with my parents in front of me and was put on the spot as to who I wanted to live with.
Hmm. At 11.
No, at 11. Nothing to inform me before, nothing to help me support with my decisions before. And at that time, I knew that safety at that time would have been with my father. So I chose to move with my father, and then we moved to Winnipeg for grades 7 to 9. And during that time, during junior high, um, I was not thought as of a normal person in junior high in Winnipeg, in the rich area in Charleswood. That's where I was going to school. And so I was the only brown person, so to speak, at that school. So instantly I was grouped and um, people were, I was put on a spot even with our guidance counselors, because even when I got there, they're like, "Oh, you're Inuk, so you must need help with alcohol problems. You must need help with drug problems." And I knew what alcohol was, but I didn't know the negative impact it had on us.
You must
And
have
so I
felt very alone.
I did, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And so things like that, and making sure my children didn't have to go through that, and so ensuring working with schools, ensuring that children here in the south that are going to southern schools, they are still linked with culture, that they still have someone that they can go to within the school system to support them and guide them in making the right decisions.
So you
And
work
so
with the Inuktitut Center for Children, Youth, and Families, and it's in Ottawa.
that's correct.
Why Ottawa? What's the significance of Ottawa in the life of Inuit people?
Well, Ottawa didn't choose me. Ottawa chose my late oldest daughter.
Mm.
So Billy Joe, when she moved down south and she wanted to fly the nest, so to speak, when she moved out of the house, she got a job with Agnico Eagle Mine, which is outside of Baker Lake. And what they do is you do 3 weeks in at the mine and 3 weeks out. And so at that time, she had moved to Gatineau, which is just across the bridge from Ottawa. And so for 2 years, Billy Joe lived happily. She was going back and forth doing heavy equipment operator maintenance at the mine and doing 3 weeks here in Ottawa. Um, on her last 3 weeks at home, she spent the first week with us in Toronto, because that was the week of the Road Juniors when they were here. And the following week, I was under the impression she was going back to work. So I did not have contact with her for about a week and a half. And then I got a phone call from the Gatineau police saying that my daughter's body was found and that she had passed away. And then fast forward 4 years later, when my youngest daughter,
Hold on, Mickey. Let's take a pause. Let's breathe on that one.
mhm, that was really hard for us. It still is hard sometimes too. It is still hard to deal with and speak about. But I need to ensure that her
So,
voices and my aunt's voices
so
and all the other,
this pain defined your path, did it not?
it does.
It reshaped you
It did completely.
and led you to Inuktitut.
It did.
So tell us about the work you do there. What is Inuktitut? What's it trying to do?
So Inuktitut Center is a multi-organization hub, a multi-hub, where Inuit families can come to support from when they are in their mother's belly all the way to the elders. So we provide the whole family support to the whole family from the womb. We have a child daycare, we have a Head Start, we have a kindergarten, and then we have youth programs, elder programs, and adult programs. So we ensure that Inuit here in Ottawa are connected to each other, are connected to holistic programs and supports that will help them live a healthier lifestyle, that will show them what kind of decisions are healthy, what kind of dangers to look out for within a city, and just ensuring that we can celebrate the strength and beauty of Inuit culture together here in a city of 1 million people, where often, a lot of times, we can feel like we are alone.
How come so many Inuit people are in Ottawa? How does that work?
So, how that works is Nunavut is very large geographically. So, it pretty much spans all of north, east, south, west, south, and eastern Canada, depending on where you are. So, in the western region, for instance, above Alberta and above BC, you have the Kitikmeot region. Above Calgary, Alberta, Calgary, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, you have Nunavut region, the Quebec region, and then above us in Ontario, we have the Baffin region. So depending on which region you live, you always got to go down for supports for doctors or to see education. Depending on what area you live, you go
Is
to the
that
south.
because there's
For
insufficient
instance,
support up north for that in education and healthcare? There's a lack
that
of
is
support.
that is correct.
So people are compelled to go to Ottawa to get these resources?
That's correct. Depending on which region. So if you're in the western region, they go down to Edmonton. If you're
Okay.
in central, you go to Winnipeg. And then Baffin region is the largest region of the other two. Baffin region supports 13 communities, whereas the other two regions only support 7. So a lot of the 13 communities in Nunavut come to Ottawa for higher education or for medical. And so, which is why you see a higher influx of Inuit coming here to Ottawa versus Winnipeg or Edmonton or
Now,
Montreal.
I've often heard stories, and I saw a movie recently whose name I can't recall, about how the Inuit can get stuck in Ottawa. Is that
Yes,
true? And how
that
does
is
that
true.
work? How does that happen?
It happens when you are flown down for medical and you have to go see your doctor. And if you don't make your appointment, you lose your flight back to you lose your flight back to the north. And often that happens, I would say about a third of the trip, third of the travelers come down, miss their appointment, and they have to find their own way back home. And a lot of times, if you don't aren't aware, it's about $2,000 to $3,000 one way for airfare back to Nunavut. And if you're further, you have to take 2 or 3 planes. So that right there is $4,000.
Mickey, it seems asinine to hear this. Is are not public resources sufficient to fly people back? It's a one-way flight. Like, how can that be?
A lot of the times, the medical boarding homes have a zero tolerance for any substance use. So if there's that can be a barrier as well.
Uh-huh.
So there's multiple reasons why people might not be able to make their right flight back home. But there are medical services that are able to assist them, like OSNI and other in your organizations, NTI, that might be able to assist in repatriating them back home. But a lot of times they like just stay here in Ottawa for some reason.
How many are now in Ottawa?
Uh, it fluctuates. There's between 5,000 to about 7,000 Inuit in Ottawa.
And would you estimate how many of those interact with Inuktitut?
I would probably say about half. Because we have our post-secondary education support, which provides supports to Inuit students going to secondary schooling to ensure that they're successful. We provide daycare, so any students that are coming down for post-secondary, they usually bring their family, including their children, so they'll go to our childcare program. We have family drop-ins twice a week, so families are able to come in and just watch a movie together. During the even the winter times, we have outing activities that we take them out for sliding, to go pick strawberries in the summer, pumpkins in the fall time, etc.
Thank you, Mickey. We're going to
You're
take a
welcome.
break. Coming up after the break, we're going to hear about what it's like for Mickey to shoulder the burdens of her community and for her colleagues. And can't wait to see you again in the next 2 minutes. Speak to you
Thank you,
soon.
Stephen. Perfect.
Welcome back to 1610 CHHA Toronto AM radio. You're listening to Figuring It Out. I'm your host, Steve Gottlieb. I have with me Mickey, the executive director of the Inuktitut Center for Children, Youth, and Families. And I, I want to carry on the conversation. No one better than you and your colleagues to understand what challenges Inuit newcomers face in Ottawa. Is it fair to call them refugees, or is that too much of a stretch?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. I would say that there are thousands of Inuit living here in Ottawa. Like we mentioned, some come for medical, some for education, and some also because of the housing crisis in Nunavut leaves them no choice. Sometimes they come because they're seeking safety or opportunity. And like
And
yourself, I heard some people call them, some
when
people
they
use the
arrive,
word,
what challenges do they face?
yep. I would say that, and I want to be careful with that word because Inuit, I would say, no, are not necessarily refugees in our own homeland of Canada, but many are just displaced by the circumstances or overcrowding of housing in Nunavut, by the limited infrastructure up there, by systematic inequities and which have existed since we've been colonized. In some Nunavut communities, you can still find about 10 or more people living in one home where there's mold, the wait lists that stretch so long, suicide rates are 10 times higher than normal. So when families come to the South, they're often carrying trauma. They're carrying hope, they're carrying fear. And when they arrive to our doors, they enter systems that see them as Inuks. They see them as having a distinct language, distinct culture and history, and they understand the I have a hard time saying that word, jurisdictional,
Jurisdictional.
jur, that word,
Yeah.
realities. Funding structures often don't follow them, as we normally know. Services are not always designed with us in mind, and that's the gap that our center fills. And we see the Inuit families that are coming down needing a lot of support, not only in medical when they're going for appointments, but when their children are entering the school systems, when they're trying to enter the workforce, or even challenging living in a city and how to navigate the city safely, especially when there's so many dangers around each corner.
I got to ask, Mickey, how do you and your colleagues cope with this burden of so many?
Yep, definitely. So we are the largest Indigenous organization in Ottawa. I have about 120 staff running out of 7 locations. I've always told my staff it's very important to debrief, to be able to talk about what they seen that day, what they seen that week, to be able to talk about what they thought was successful, what they thought they could improvise and work on. And I've always told my staff it's very important to disconnect after 5, that it's important for them to have their emotional well-being looked after as well, and their safety as well. So we have a pretty robust benefits package, which includes counseling, um, unlimited counseling for all my staff. And I do know a lot of us, including myself, use that service, which helps to ensure that we are not traumatized as well by what we see and hear on a daily basis.
Is it fair to say, I've heard you tell me, literally sitting by a river, that your community, there is not an Inuk person not impacted by suicide,
Unfortunately, so
that it's in every family, and the trauma can often define the scope of the work that you do at Inuktitut. Is that fair to say?
that's correct.
Is Inuktitut funded well enough?
No, actually, we are fairly underfunded, unfortunately, and that's one of the issues we've been actually working with the pullback of the Inuit Child First initiative, because Inuit are not able to access Jordan's principle. they had to, the
Sorry,
federal
take a
government.
moment. What's Jordan's principle for our listeners, please?
No problem. So Jordan's principle is a financial support provided from the federal government to assist with medical, um, any medical situations that might help or hinder a family having to come down for some medical. And so families, First Nations and Métis families can apply to Jordan's principle to ensure that their children receive the medical support in time. And Jordan's principle came out due to an unfortunate incident of a little boy who had passed away about 10 years ago from the lack of ownership from federal or provincial bodies.
Is it true? I read recently that the federal government will be investing more money in the coming year for places like Jordan's Principle. Is that true? Are you hearing the same thing? Like 250 million.
I have not heard that. I've actually heard the opposite, that
Hmm.
even CFI was not put into the budget or anything in the budget I didn't see on MMIWG, which is a big red flag for us as well.
So you guys are struggling.
We are.
Are you a charity and can people donate to you?
Yes, we can. We have a charitable status and we are on, that is on our website as well.
I know we'll post the link to your agency, and hopefully
Perfect.
people
Thank you.
listening to this will be inclined to support. I guess I want to ask you a really fundamental question. I'm going to ask you to look at a window of time where point A is your birth and point B is today in Ottawa. Has the situation for Inuit people improved?
I would
Loaded
say no.
question, I know.
Yeah, I would say 75% no, 25% yes.
Let's start with the 75% no and hopefully conclude with a ray of hope, shall we? So why
Definitely.
no? Why no?
The cost of living has increased up north. Um, there's very, the housing crisis up north is really high. Um, there's more access to drugs and alcohol up north, while no access to mental health support or no access to rehab in the north. Um, Overcrowded housing, there's starving families, children are becoming starving after CFI provided food allowance for every child for a year and then cut it off last minute, making Inuit families depend on that extra income and then take it away. So now they're left hanging, we are left hanging again.
What has made the situation get so stuck?
Pardon?
What has made this situation? You're basically saying not much has changed. What's what's making this situation be stuck?
I would say the lack of investments into Nunavut, lack of infrastructure investments. I do understand that they're building a university, but wouldn't you think first that Nunavut would need at least a dozen, what's the word I'm thinking of? A dozen, my mind's at a blank, family wellness centers.
Yes. So more resources need to be invested, is what you're saying.
Yes.
What about the concept of autonomy, sovereignty? Has that situation evolved and is it making things better?
I would say it's slowly evolving. More Inuit now are knowing, like myself, I did not know when I was going to high school that I had a choice in what I was going to do when I was going to grow up.
Hmm.
At my time, when I was going to high school, it was just survival. So we weren't even thinking of what I wanted to be when we were growing up. And now Inuit have that advantage where, oh, I can become a doctor. Oh, I can become a social worker. Oh, I can become a chef. Hence the 25% we're getting better. So we're starting to see more Inuit getting designated, getting more schooling in post-secondary and getting those designations so that they can come back to Nunavut and try help build Nunavut into a
And is
healthy.
that happening? Are you seeing a like a river flowing north, back north, with
I
better
would love to
resources
say
and better educated people?
I would love to say yes, but I do know a barrier from when we do graduate our programs. We try go home, but there's no housing. The cost of renting up north is astronomical. And so you need to at least be making a three-figure salary in order to rent so that you can pay for the house and you can pay for food on your table. Because a lot of times it's either food or rent. And you have to pay the rent. So a lot of times there's no food, so they're using a lot of the food banks and that are up north. And there's not food banks in every community. There's only food banks in the bigger, larger communities.
Let's say you woke up and you were given this magic button and you could press it and it would fix things. What button would you press? What magic fix do you have? What do you want to see happen?
I would push the button of infrastructure and funding. Infrastructure to build medical facilities in each town, to build colleges and health centers in each town, to ensure that each town has oops,
All good. You have a busy life, Mickey. We can actually still hear you over the ring. Don't be concerned, please.
okay, no problem. It just made me lose my train of thought.
Well, you were calling for more resources and money and
Hmm.
infrastructure.
That's right. Yeah.
So, no, it's not
Family
rocket
healing.
science. You're not saying it's rocket science to fix things.
Yeah, they need family healing
Indeed.
places before bringing more beer stores into the towns. They need more mental health supports. They need to hire Inuit for Inuit. Even the
Let's
government
end with
jobs
something
that you.
fun. Let's end with
Mhm.
something fun, shall we?
Yeah,
The Boundless Inukatigi partnership. And we have
yes,
two big ones coming up. And we have a young lad in our school right now who we're going to hire this summer. So tell me what's coming up this summer with Boundless and Inukatigi, what you're looking
yes,
forward to.
definitely. Even that's all the staff are actually looking forward to it, and we've already started planning to see because there's always staff that wants to join and wants to come, and so we want to make sure we give everyone an equal opportunity to see the beautiful Boundless, to enjoy being connected culture, connected to each other at the beautiful facilities that you have. I know we've had
We've got a
last year we
whole
had our
lot.
first multi. Yes,
Please go
last year it
ahead.
was
Sorry to
so
interrupt.
amazing going with our first multi-generational camp. That itself was amazing to see and witness our children running beside the elders that were telling
Ah,
stories and just the children really listening to the elder when she lit up the kudlek.
we have the Inukshuk still standing, and there's going to be more. I guess that's my favorite. I mean, we have a group of youth, just the young people coming up, but we also have, I don't know, 40 or 50 family community members coming all at once. And that's when I start hanging around because it's really a lovely energy there. Thank
Yes.
you, Mickey, for joining us today and for investing 30 minutes of what seems to be very precious time for you. Listening to you and Ken and Julie for this past hour humbles me. I see people tending and stitching the wounds of their communities, daily acts of repair, nurturing growth. I get a sense, all three of you feel that there's a sense of the wheels are spinning, that growth is measured in small increments. And this daily grind, this daily effort to repair ruptures in the fabric of your people. It makes you superheroes to me.
Thank you very much.
I thank you all, our listeners, for listening to Figuring It Out, Tales of Clumsy Utopias, and we've just heard a story of a beautiful one. Thank you, Mickey, and your colleagues for the incredible work you do.
You're very welcome.
Take care.
You too. Stay safe.
You've been listening to Figuring It Out. Stories of people trying to solve some of society's toughest problems without a manual and rarely getting it right the first time. Progress is messy, but it counts. I'm Steve Gottlieb. Thanks for being here. Until next time.